CEO Neil Carter tossed the folder across the table like it was a trash bag he wanted out of his office. Papers slid, corners bent, and he didn't flinch. "Sign it," he said, voice clean, casual. "We're moving faster now." I picked the folder up without rushing. That pause irritated him. I was Iris Lane, head of ethics and compliance, the quiet name attached to approvals that unlocked tax incentives, regulatory clearance, and financing worth tens of millions. My work didn't sparkle. It stabilized. Neil didn't value stability. He valued speed, optics, and applause. He'd arrived 6 months earlier preaching momentum and reinvention. He skimmed compliance memos, waved off ethics briefings, and joked about old guard thinking. To him, oversight was friction. To me, it was the difference between operating and being shut down. That difference sat between us in cheap paper and polite language. The termination letter was already finalized. HR signatures, legal language, no questions invited. Neil leaned back, satisfied, watching me the way people watch obstacles being removed. He expected anger, a speech, something dramatic enough to justify the decision. Instead, I smiled. I signed. The pen moved once, smooth and final. The smile stayed on my face long enough for his confidence to waver. I capped the pen, slid the folder back, and stood. "Good luck, Neil." He laughed, short and dismissive. Already done with me, in his mind. Authority simplified everything. He never read the frameworks that kept this company eligible, compliant, and trusted. That had been my responsibility. Until it wasn't. Behind him, the wall clock continued forward. Somewhere in the system, an independent ethics status expired. A requirement quietly failed. A safeguard disengaged. Neil's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. His smile tightened as the screen lit up without stopping. I walked out calmly, carrying nothing but certainty. Speed had just collided with rules that never argue, never rush, and never forget. They wait patiently, then collect their debt when arrogance finally signs its own exit. How are you feeling right now, still calm? Or did that moment hit a nerve if your space feels heavy? Try arranging a small vase of fresh flowers on your desk or table tonight. It's a quiet reset you can do right away. Where are you listening from? I always like knowing which corner of the world these stories reach. Stay with me. And if this speaks to you, consider subscribing because what happened next didn't unfold loudly, but it changed everything. I packed my office without speaking, folding years of routine into a cardboard box that felt too small for what it carried. Awards went face down. Framed policies slid between folders. No one stopped me. Silence has a way of pretending it's neutral, even when it's chosen. I kept my face steady because anger would have given the moment more dignity than it deserved. I remembered the first time I protected the company from itself. A rushed acquisition. Incomplete disclosures. I stayed late, rewrote attestations, and took the risk onto my own name so the board could sleep. Later came the investigation that never made the news. Because I caught it before regulators did. I signed ethics certifications that preserved tax incentives, credit facilities, and trust. I didn't celebrate those wins. I filed them. Neil Carter never saw any of that. In meetings, he cut me off mid-sentence, smiling as if efficiency excused disrespect. "This is just bureaucracy," he once said, waving away a compliance briefing like lint on a jacket. He wanted speed, not safeguards. I learned to compress warnings into bullet points he still didn't read. Each interruption taught me the same lesson: prevention is invisible until it's gone. As I cleared my desk, my inbox refreshed on its own. No sound, no warning, just a subject line that felt surgical in its precision. Independent ethics status terminated. The words sat there, cold and official, severing a role I had spent decades earning. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, letting the bitterness settle without spilling. I closed the laptop and lifted the box. That was when another notification arrived. This one marked external, a partner bank. The tone was polite, almost apologetic. Due to a change in compliance certification, certain disbursements were being temporarily paused pending review. No accusation, no explanation. Just procedure doing what it was designed to do. The weight in my chest wasn't fear. It was recognition. Loyalty doesn't protect you when memory is short and ambition is loud. It only leaves a record, waiting patiently for someone else to ignore. I adjusted my grip on the box and kept walking, aware that restraint had already done its work, and consequences were simply catching up. I walked past Neil's office on the way out. He was laughing on a call, unaware that loyalty had just finished echoing through the systems he dismissed. The silence followed me to the elevator, heavy with restraint, sharp with consequence, and quietly irreversible. Nothing dramatic followed me, only the slow certainty that silence, once dismissed as harmless, had already begun rearranging outcomes far beyond any meeting room he controlled. And this was only the beginning. 5 minutes after Iris Lane walked out, my phone started vibrating like something was wrong with the building itself. I glanced at the screen, annoyed, expecting routine noise. Instead, alerts stacked on each other faster than I could clear them. Incentive status pending review. Credit facility paused. Compliance verification required. I snapped at IT first. Systems glitch. I told myself, someone pushed a bad update. Finance came next. Why were banks suddenly cautious? No one had answers. They spoke in fragments, numbers, partial explanations that refused to line up. The room felt smaller with every sentence. Another notification arrived, then another. A partner flagged our ethics certification as incomplete. Another requested immediate reattestation. The language was polite, procedural, infuriating. I felt heat rise in my chest. We had passed audits for years. Nothing material had changed. Except Iris. I paced and blamed process. I blamed old frameworks, unnecessary checks, legacy roles I had meant to clean up. I told myself this was temporary friction, the cost of moving fast. Still, the messages kept coming. Funds frozen, approvals deferred, meetings canceled without explanation. I called finance again. They sounded nervous now. I accused them of incompetence. I accused it of negligence. I demanded fixes, overrides, workarounds. Silence followed each demand. No one could point to a button to press. Finally, legal walked in. Our general counsel looked pale, holding a tablet like evidence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She asked one question, slow and careful. Who is your current ethics signatory? The room went quiet. I opened my mouth, confident at first, then slower. I named the role, not the person. I waited for someone to correct me. No one did. She shook her head once. We don't have one, she said. The words landed harder than any accusation. I felt the air leave the room. The systems weren't broken. They were obeying rules I had dismissed. 5 minutes earlier, I had solved a personnel problem. Now I was staring at something colder. A company that could not move forward because I had removed the one signature it depended on. The realization crawled up my spine. This was not sabotage. It was compliance doing exactly what it promised investors and regulators. I had called it bureaucracy. I had laughed at caution. Now every frozen line item felt deliberate, methodical, and merciless. I stood there listening to silence, understanding too late that speed does not outrun structure. It collides with it. And when it does, the damage does not announce itself loudly. It waits, calculates, and then stops everything. That was when fear finally replaced confusion. In my chest, certainty collapsed without warning. Nothing prepared me for that. I sat at my kitchen table long after sunset, shoes still on, coat untouched, letting the quiet do its work. I didn't call anyone. I didn't open my laptop. Silence, when chosen, is not weakness, it's a position. What was happening no longer required my involvement. My mind returned to a meeting months earlier, one Neil Carter barely remembered. I had walked him through the ethics continuity clause, a provision tied to our incentives and credit facilities. I explained it slowly, using his language, translating risk into dollars. If the independent signatory is removed, I said, the system pauses until continuity is restored. He leaned back, bored, and cut me off. Legal will handle it, Neil said, already checking his phone. Legal did handle it. They wrote the clause exactly as required. They filed it. They archived it. And Neil signed it. I remember the signature because he made a show of it. He joked about paperwork, about how founders hate fine print. He never asked a follow-up question. He never read the appendix. He never noticed that independence, once broken, cannot be instantly repaired without invalidating the entire framework. That clause was never designed to punish anyone. It existed to protect trust when leadership changed. Remove the independent signer, and the system does what it is supposed to do. It waits. No override, no temporary fix, no executive exception. That isn't revenge, that is design. My phone buzzed once on the table. I ignored it. Then again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Neil was discovering the part he never read, somewhere between his confidence and his panic. He would find the signature block with his own name on it. I felt no urge to intervene. The law doesn't reward good intentions, only correct structures. And the structure was clear. The clause did not allow reversals. Rehiring me would not restore independence. Asking me to sign again would contaminate the record. There was no undo button. I poured a cup of tea and watched steam rise. Calm and precise. This was the quiet satisfaction of preparation meeting inevitability. I hadn't triggered anything. I had simply stopped standing between arrogance and its consequences. Neil believed authority could erase complexity. What he never read was that systems remember everything, especially the parts written to outlast him. The realization carried no triumph, only clarity. This was how governance worked when respected. Remove ego, remove noise, and the mechanisms reveal themselves. Neil would search for villains, for shortcuts, for someone to blame. He would not find me. He would only find his own signature, staring back at him in silence, without mercy or apology. From the page, if you think you figured it out, the next part will prove you haven't. The phone rang while I was still standing in my kitchen, coat draped over one chair, keys resting where I had dropped them. I knew it was Neil Carter before I answered, because timing like this never belongs to coincidence. His voice opened confident, practiced, almost amused. "Iris," he said, "we may have moved too quickly." I stayed standing. Silence shifted the balance immediately, and he rushed to fill it. The speed in his voice changed direction, words stacking faster than thought. He talked about solutions, temporary fixes, optics. He said the situation was manageable if we acted decisively. Then came the offers, delivered as if generosity could rewrite structure. "Come back temporarily," he said. "We'll adjust compensation, significantly." I didn't respond. That unsettled him. He tried again. "New title." He added, "Careful now. Chief Ethics Advisor." The phrase sounded rehearsed, polished for a board that had finally noticed consequences. 5 minutes earlier, I was excess. Now I was leverage. The reversal was almost impressive. I pictured his conference room, screens glowing, people whispering while pretending not to panic. I imagined calendars clearing, calls stacking, explanations running out. That image stayed private. I let the line breathe for several seconds, long enough for him to mistake silence for negotiation. "We just need your signature," he said, urgency slipping through the polish. "Help us stabilize." I finally spoke. "You don't want me back," I said evenly. You want my absence undone. He started to interrupt, instinctively, the way he always had in meetings. I didn't let him. The power had already shifted, and he could feel it, even if he didn't understand it yet. I placed the phone on the table, pressed speaker, and dialed another number. When my attorney answered, I said, "Please explain our position." Neil went quiet as authority moved out of his voice and into the room with me. My attorney didn't rush. She explained independence, contamination, and the consequences of reversing a termination after certification failure. Neil tried once more. "There has to be a way," he said. That was the moment his confidence collapsed into urgency. I didn't respond. The call wasn't mine anymore. I stood there listening as the rules spoke for me, calm and irreversible. While Neil Carter learned that leverage doesn't come from titles, it comes from understanding what you removed before you needed it back. The room felt smaller once the law entered the conversation, not because voices rose, but because options disappeared. I stayed silent while my attorney spoke, her tone level, precise, almost gentle. "Iris no longer qualifies as an independent ethics signatory," she said. "Any attempt to reinstate her now would invalidate every certification tied to her role." Neil didn't accept that answer. I could hear him pacing through the phone, breath sharp, confidence cracking. "That doesn't make sense," he said. "She worked here for years. We can fix this." His words carried the same impatience he used in meetings, the belief that urgency could bend structure. My attorney didn't react. "Independence isn't about tenure," she replied. "It's about separation. Once that separation is compromised, the framework collapses." She paused, letting the weight settle. A new signature at this stage would contaminate the record. Regulators would treat it as an admission. Neil pushed harder. He mentioned lawsuits. He questioned intent. He implied damages. "We're talking about millions," he said, as if scale could intimidate the law into flexibility. I watched the steam fade from my coffee and felt nothing rise to replace it. Justice, when it's cold, doesn't argue. "There is nothing to negotiate," my attorney said. "This is not a business dispute, it's a compliance reality." Neil's voice dropped, then surged again, anger filling the space where authority used to be. He accused me of sabotage without naming it. He accused the system of being outdated. He accused everyone except himself. I finally spoke, briefly. "You removed the independence," I said. The law responded. That was all. Silence followed, thick and final. The call ended without resolution. Minutes later, my attorney's phone chimed. She glanced at the message, then looked at me. "The agency has initiated a comprehensive review," she said, full scope. The words landed with quiet certainty. This was no longer about restoring access or saving face. It was about accountability. I nodded once. There was no satisfaction in it. Only clarity. Neil had believed power lived in titles and speed. He never understood that law moves differently. It waits, it documents, it remembers. Outside, traffic moved as usual. Inside, the structure held. Cold justice does not announce itself. It simply closes doors that should never have been forced open. And once closed, it does not listen to threats, promises, or regret. The collapse did not arrive as a single event. It moved in stages. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Incentives were formally withdrawn, not threatened, not delayed, but rescinded with language so careful it left no room for appeal. Strategic contracts followed, placed on suspension pending regulatory review. Partners cited risk exposure. Lenders cited fiduciary duty. No one mentioned Neil by name. They didn't need to. I watched it unfold from a distance, reading notices forwarded by counsel, each one colder than the last. What had once been momentum turned brittle. Deals that relied on credibility stalled. Calendars emptied. The company that prided itself on speed discovered how fragile acceleration becomes without traction. Neil tried to counter the damage the only way he knew how. Press statements appeared, filled with optimism and vague assurances. He framed the disruption as a temporary compliance realignment. He blamed legacy processes. He promised innovation. None of it slowed the withdrawals. PR can shape perception, but it cannot satisfy auditors. When regulators scheduled interviews, my name appeared on the list. Not as a defendant, not as an advocate, as a witness. I agreed without hesitation. I had nothing to defend and nothing to conceal. I answered questions with dates, documents, and facts. Emotion never entered the room. That absence unsettled them more than anger would have. Neil avoided eye contact during the session, his posture tight, his confidence reduced to talking points. For the first time, he could not interrupt. Every attempt to reframe was redirected back to the record. He had removed safeguards and signed the consequences. The chain was already moving. The board meeting happened without announcement. When the decision came, it arrived as a notice, not a confrontation. Neil's operational authority was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. The language was clinical. Leadership continuity, risk mitigation, no mention of ambition or vision. I felt no triumph reading it, only recognition. Systems fail gradually, then all at once. But only when someone insists on testing limits they don't understand. The unraveling was not caused by malice. It was caused by dismissal. I closed the file and sat quietly, aware that my role was complete. I had not pushed. I had not pursued. I had simply stepped aside and let the structure respond. That is how collapses happen when rules are ignored. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one decision triggering another, until authority dissolves under the weight of its own shortcuts. The board did not call me afterward. They didn't need reassurance or commentary. Silence was enough. Accountability had shifted ownership, and the outcome was now procedural, not personal. That realization settled in slowly, heavy but clean, like a verdict reached without applause or dissent. Nothing else was required from me anymore. The boardroom felt unfamiliar without Neil at the head of the table, though he was present, seated to the side, posture tight, voice rehearsed. I was invited as a witness, not an advocate, and I took the seat offered without ceremony. The chair faced the directors, not him, which told me everything about how the morning would unfold. Neil spoke first. "This disruption is a legacy systems issue," he said. Steady but strained. Outdated controls failed to adapt to our pace. He blamed inherited frameworks, consultants, anyone who wasn't him. He framed speed as courage and caution as drag. The words sounded practiced, hollow and late. The chair interrupted gently. "We will review the record." Screens lit, emails appeared, dated, threaded, precise. My messages were brief and factual. Neil's replies were shorter, dismissive. One line repeated itself across months. "Legal will handle it." The room stayed quiet while the pattern assembled itself. Next came the signatures. His signature, clear, unmistakable, placed beneath the ethics continuity clause he once waved away. The language was read aloud, clause by clause. Without commentary, it described independence, separation, and the consequence of removal. No exceptions, no reversals, no urgency carve-outs. Neil stared at the table as if distance might soften ink. I was asked to confirm the facts. I did. The clause was explained. I said. The risk was disclosed. I did not accuse. I did not editorialize. I answered questions, named dates, and referenced files. Truth does not need heat, it only needs sequence. Neil tried again. "We can remediate," he said. Louder now. "Appoint a new signer. Bring Iris back." The chair shook her head. "That would contaminate the record," another director added. "Reinstatement would compound exposure." Neil's jaw tightened. The room did not. The emails returned to the screen. Requests from banks, Notices from partners. The pause. The freeze. The chain reaction he had called bureaucracy. It was all there, orderly and damning. Neil's shoulders rounded as explanations collapsed into silence. The decision followed procedure. Not drama. To reduce ongoing harm, the chair said. We are requesting your resignation. The word requested landed harder than demanded. It left no leverage. Neil looked up, eyes searching for support that wasn't there. I remained still. This was not my victory. It was accountability finding its address. Neil gathered his papers, hands unsteady, and nodded once. Understood, he said. The room exhaled. As I left, I felt the weight lift, not with satisfaction, but with relief. The boardroom had done what systems do when respected. It faced the record, accepted consequence, and moved forward without spectacle. Shame does not need witnesses when the facts are complete. It simply sits with the person who earned it. Afterward, counsel summarized next steps, timelines, disclosures, and cooperation protocols, all procedural, all inevitable. I signed nothing, promised nothing, and left nothing ambiguous. The directors avoided platitudes. They asked for precision and received it. Outside the room, reporters waited for spectacle and received none. Consequences rarely perform. They proceed. As I stepped into the corridor, I understood the humiliation belonged to Neil alone, carried quietly, enforced politely, and sealed by his own choices, recorded patiently, reviewed carefully, and concluded without malice. Nothing else was required, requested, or forgiven, and the record closed itself without ceremony. That morning ended. I did not recognize the company once the noise settled. The story moved without me. Headlines focused on failure of ethical oversight, not personalities. Analysts dissected controls, timelines, and governance gaps. My name appeared only in footnotes, if at all. That anonymity felt earned. Justice rarely needs a face, it needs a record. That record stood. Neil's reputation unraveled quietly in executive circles. Invitations stopped. Boards paused conversations. Search firms withdrew interest without explanation. People remembered his shortcuts when questions arrived. He was not accused publicly. He was avoided privately. That distinction mattered. Influence evaporates faster than titles. Trust leaves no forwarding address. He learned that late. Others noticed sooner. Lessons travel. I kept my distance and my routine. Mornings were quiet. Evenings felt lighter. I spoke only through counsel when asked. The investigation progressed methodically. Documents closed loops. Findings followed structure. There was no celebration, only resolution. Accountability satisfied its own requirements. I slept knowing outcomes were earned. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. That mattered. Then the calls began. Measured and professional. Not rescues. Inquiries. Companies asked whether I would advise independently. They wanted separation, credibility, calm. I required it too. Terms were clear, scope defined, no conflicts, no appearances of repair, only prevention. That alignment felt right. It respected the work. It respected the law. It respected me. Enough. I accepted the first engagement deliberately, then another, then several more. My role was simple. Review structures, stress test governance, design continuity, leave decisions to leadership. I did not sell absolution. I sold preparation. The work traveled. So did the lesson. Ethics cannot be decorative. It must be operational. Otherwise, it disappears under pressure. Everywhere, always, eventually. The press moved on, as it does. Cycles replaced outrage. Another scandal took oxygen. What remained was quieter. Companies updated charters. Boards asked harder questions. Signatories were documented. Independence regained weight. I watched from the margin. Satisfaction arrived without noise. It felt proportionate, measured, fair. Justice does not need applause. It needs compliance. That condition held. I thought of Neil only once. Not with anger, with clarity. He mistook speed for immunity. He mistook authority for control. Those errors compound. They always do. Leadership is stewardship, not theater. Ignore that. And systems respond. They respond impersonally, predictably, completely. I did not need revenge. The framework did the work. That is the point. Always. Again. Forever. New calendars filled with meaningful work. I traveled less. I listened more. Clients valued restraint. They valued documentation. They valued time. My advice slowed decisions. That was welcomed. Prevention became visible. Budgets followed governance. Trust followed discipline. I felt aligned with outcomes. The arc closed cleanly. Justice felt sufficient. Not sweet. Not bitter. Accurate. When I signed my consulting agreement, I smiled without irony. The work had changed shape, not purpose, only scale. I kept independence explicit. Contracts reflected boundaries. Expectations were documented. I would advise. I would not absorb blame. That clarity protected everyone. Clients understood the cost. They paid it willingly. That felt like progress. Justice can be practical. It can pay rent. The aftermath settled into balance. Nothing was restored improperly. Nothing was hidden. Consequences aligned with choices. I moved forward without spectacle, without secrecy, without compromise. Fairness does not require suffering. It requires accountability. I had both. The law had spoken. I listened. Then I worked. Justice felt complete. That was enough, for now, and for me. The city outside moved through its usual morning rhythm, unaware of the chaos that had already reshaped the company. I did not smile. I did not exhale triumphantly. There was no victory to gloat over, only clarity and a calm that felt heavier than any applause could ever be. The emails, the calls, the notifications, they had all settled into their proper places. The systems had responded to the rules as they were written, impartial and unyielding. Neil Carter's attempts to reclaim control had failed without my intervention, because the architecture, the safeguards, and the legal frameworks were intact, and they had done their work. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the quiet affirmation of structure and principle settle around me like a cloak. My dignity had been overlooked, dismissed, and challenged, but it had not been destroyed. It had been preserved by design, by patience, and by the immutable logic of rules that never favor arrogance. I reflected on the lessons that came quietly in the aftermath. Loyalty and competence are not always visible. The real power lies in systems respected and responsibilities honored. I had not needed to fight, to confront, or to demand recognition. The consequences had arrived on their own schedule, precise and unrelenting. My role had been fulfilled without spectacle. The last sip of coffee lingered, warm and grounding, as I looked out the window at a world still unaware. The thought crystallized. Simple and undeniable ethics doesn't fight back. It simply stops working for you. And in that moment, I understood that power is rarely loud. It is subtle, enduring, and measured. It waits for those who ignore it to reveal the truth. And when it does, justice unfolds without fanfare, calm, impartial, and complete. Sitting here, I feel the weight of every choice I made. And I hope you can feel it too, like you're walking these hallways with me. Loyalty, patience, and doing the right thing quietly, sometimes that's the real power. Are you staying with me until the end? After this story, maybe take a moment to place a small vase of fresh flowers somewhere you can see. It's a simple way to reset your mind. Where are you listening from right now? Drop a comment, share your thoughts. And if this story moved you, consider hitting like and subscribing so we can explore the next chapter together.